Ontario's police watchdog says 2 grandparents and their infant grandchild are among 4 people killed in a multi-vehicle crash on the 401 in Whitby. A suspect vehicle driving the wrong way was being chased by police.
Premier Doug Ford has announced construction on the controversial Highway 413, which will begin next year. We're going to have reaction coming up.
And the Leafs will face the Bruins tonight in a do-or-die Game 5 in Boston. We'll have a preview coming up.
Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at noon. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thanks so much for joining us. Our top story, a police chase turned deadly after a suspect started driving the wrong way on Highway 401 in Whitby last night.
CP24's Beatrice Vaisman is at the scene with the latest on what has now become an SIU investigation. Beatrice.
Bakari and Lena, this is just such a horrific tragedy. 3 members of the same family, grandparents, and their infant grandchild pronounced dead after this horrible fiery crash here on Highway 400. The suspect that CP24 has now confirmed is a man also pronounced deceased in this crash. It all started around 7:50 last night. CP24 confirming that an off-duty Durham Regional Police officer was at an LCBO store out in Clarington. This is Green Road and Highway 2. When he saw a robbery in progress, this off-duty officer approached the suspect. The suspect, that I'm told by a Durham Regional Police source, brandished a knife. The off-duty officer backed off and called police. Police then started pursuing, and ultimately on the 401 here is where this horrible tragedy concluded. I want to show you this viewer video that was sent to CP24 this morning that captures the minutes just before the crash happened. It shows a vehicle shooting on dash camera, pulling over on the right side of the highway. These are the eastbound lanes of the 401 as this white U-Haul van flies past it, and not far behind it, a Durham Regional Police officer with its lights and sirens on as well. And then a few seconds later, 6-vehicle pileup ensues when this U-Haul van crashes into the front of a tractor trailer, essentially wrapping itself in front of it, setting off a chain reaction with at least 6 vehicles. And now we heard from the SIU, 3 people, including 2 grandparents and an infant in 1 vehicle, pronounced dead. The suspect, which CP24 again has confirmed is a man, has died, and another person is still in hospital being treated for some very serious injuries that's related to this crash. And now the SIU is investigating, looking into the protocol. Was police protocol followed? Is there any culpability on the police which contributed to this crash? Was this a pursuit that at any point was called off either by dispatch or by supervisors with Durham Police? And when I asked Monica Udon from the Special Investigations Unit about what that aspect of this investigation entails, here's her answer.
Every situation is different, and as part of the SIU's investigation, we are going to look into the pursuit, when it started, where it started, what transpired, what made up the pursuit, and taking a look at policies and things like that.
As for when it started, when it ended, we now have a clearer timeline, Lena and Bakari. 7:50, the robbery out in Clarington at that LCBO store. 8:10, 20 minutes later, this crash happened here in the eastbound lanes of Highway 401 when this vehicle fleeing from police entered the highway on Stevenson Road, traveling in the wrong direction. So what happened in those 20 minutes? That's going to be under the purview of the Special Investigation Unit's probe. And I should also add, with changes to the Policing Act that came into effect April 1st, I'm told Durham Regional Police will have to wait until the SIU concludes its investigation to start its own investigation into exactly what happened. But just an absolutely tragic scenario unfolding here on the highway last night. Lena and Bakari.
Tragic indeed. Beatrice Vaisman reporting live. Thanks so much, Beatrice. And staying with this story, the Premier was asked about the deadly collision by reporters this morning. Take a listen.
My heart goes out to the family, and my condolences go out to them. It's heart-wrenching when you see everyone from a grandfather to a little baby that lost their lives because someone decides to rob a liquor store and go on the other side of the highway. It's a tragedy. and we're going to do everything we can to equip our police that there won't have to be high-speed chases. And one of the reasons we're getting helicopters for police agencies around Ontario just to support them.
And at today's Toronto Police Services Board meeting, Chief Myron Demkiw apologized for saying that he had hoped for a different outcome in the Umar Zamir trial.
I fully understand the concerns that have been expressed, and I've been reflecting on my comments as the Chief of Police. I apologize for my choice of words in those early moments outside the courthouse. I want to be very clear and repeat that I respect and accept the decision of the jury. As I've said, closure can never come at the expense of justice. I should have been more clear that I support and accept the verdict.
Umar Zamir was found not guilty in the death of Constable Jeffrey Northrup, who was hit and killed in an underground parking lot in 2021. The Superior Court judge said that testimony from police officers didn't match the physical evidence presented at the trial and suggested a possible collusion. That prompted Chief Myron Demkiw to call for an OPP review and an internal review of plainclothes policing.
Well, Brampton's mayor held several high-level meetings in Ottawa yesterday.
Yeah, Patrick Brown met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Parliament Hill. And according to a statement from Brown's office, the two men discussed the construction of the LRT into downtown Brampton and efforts to combat vehicle theft, among other issues.
Well, my biggest concern right now is public safety in the GTA. We've seen break-and-enters skyrocket. We've seen auto thefts that are linked to the break-and-enters, obviously at record levels in the GTA. And rather than just criticize, I wanted to go to Ottawa and make suggestions of, how our police believe we could handle these challenges. And so, he was generous with his time. He was open to our ideas, and it centered around. We need to have more stringent bail provisions for the theft of property. So if you steal a car, it's not a slap on the wrist. Even the gold heists that we had recently where the police were able to arrest everyone because it relates to property, all the individuals who were caught by police in Canada's largest gold heist were actually released.
Brown says that the meeting also focused on managing the increase in asylum claimants and building transit-oriented housing.
The race to be the next mayor of Mississauga is getting into full swing. CTV political commentator Scott Reid says it should be an interesting campaign.
Bonnie Crombie has stepped away as mayor to become the Ontario Liberal leader. Her ex-husband has decided on the last day of nominations that he was going to throw his name in, so he wants to run. And then another name that's familiar to people, Hazel McCallion, past mayor, 100 years old, Hurricane Hazel. Her son decides that he's going to run. Then he pulls out, throws his support to Carolyn Parrish, who's been around forever, was a member of caucus when I was in Ottawa 20-some years ago. She got into trouble for stepping on a doll at George Bush. A little bit, she can sort of flirt with the edge of kooky, and so you got all of that.
The nomination window closed last week with 20 candidates putting their names forward. The 6-week by-election campaign concludes June 10th when voters head to the polls.
And the Art Gallery of Ontario is set to reopen today after its workers voted to ratify a new agreement.
The union representing the AGO employees says 85% of the workers who cast their ballots accepted the deal. The agreement included an 11.4% wage increase for full-time and part-time workers.
Well, just 3 months after announcing its cancer diagnosis, King Charles III is back to public engagements.
Let's bring in CTV National's Scott Hurst for more on this. Scott.
Lena and Bakari, far from a full return to public duties, but cautious optimism as King Charles returns to the public eye. He visited a cancer center this morning alongside his wife, Queen Camilla. They were seen getting out of their vehicle in front of the cancer center, shaking hands with some of the people lining up outside, and then giving a customary wave and a smile to the crowd that had gathered outside. Inside the cancer center, he met with some of the technicians and some of the medical professionals who work on site, and he also had time to sit down down and chat with some of the patients there at the cancer center. Was able to ask about their care, how they're feeling in terms of how he's doing. Nothing official on the King's health update, but he did say he's doing better and feeling fine. However, we don't have an official update or a full scope of the King's health. In typical royal fashion, that remains incredibly vague. We still don't know the type of cancer that he has, and we don't know. The King's doctors, in a statement last week, said they are sufficiently pleased, allowing him to return to the public eye. But we do know the King's treatment is ongoing. Here's more from CTV royal commentator Afia Hagen.
When he was asked how he was feeling, he said, much better, thanks. So people definitely breathing a tentative sigh of relief. We have to remember, and it was really made clear in that statement that we got last week on Friday, this doesn't mean that the King's cancer treatment is over. It doesn't mean that he is cured, but it does mean that he's well enough to be able to take these steps, and that is a great thing.
So Bakari and Lena, he was a short visit to this cancer center today, one of his first public appearance officially since his cancer diagnosis several months ago. He was seen in public over the Easter break, meeting well-wishers outside of a church service, but other than that, nothing official since his diagnosis was made public.
All right, Scott Hurst reporting live from our national newsroom. Scott, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The Leafs were on the ice in Boston this morning before their must-win Game 5 tonight. All eyes on that.
Oh, sorry, I had to jump
You're
the gun there.
excited. Look, I get it.
We're talking about Austin Matthews. He made a brief appearance on the ice before the rest of the team practice got underway. But there's still no word on whether he's going to play tonight. This is after he left Game 4 before the third period began as he battles an illness. There's also questions about who's going to start in goal tonight for Toronto after Joseph Woll finished off Game 4 in net. So Toronto was down 3-1 in the series after dropping both games at Scotiabank Arena.
I think if you go back in time, there's plenty of examples of teams overcoming challenges, being down in a series, but I think we're just focused on us and what we need to do, and going out there and executing our game plan and competing hard.
What's the mood with the team right now?
Optimistic. I mean, we're down 3-1, but we're focusing on the game tonight and try and get a win.
Tonight's game gets underway at 7 o'clock.
Oh, coming up next on CB24 Live at noon, we're going to take you to Montreal to get an update on the protest encampment on the McGill University campus. Stay with us for more on that. Welcome back. McGill University is asking Montreal police to help remove a protest encampment set up by pro-Palestinian activists on campus today.
For the latest on the situation, let's go live to CTV Montreal's Matt Grillo. Matt, let's start off with you just kind of setting the scene for us. What is it like on campus right now?
Well, it's been pretty well, peaceful and quiet, at least this morning. I'll step aside here for a second to give you guys an idea of, what we've been seeing throughout the morning. They just actually quieted down. There were some chants, some pro-Palestinian chants going on. So basically, you see some supporters here standing in front, or mostly supporters at least, and then behind them is this fence that's been set up now for a few days. And within that is really the encampment of what's going on here. When we talk about the encampment, that's it. There's about 50 tents, maybe 60, 65 tents or so set up there. We can't get access to it. It's blocked off. They won't let the media in past those gates there. And this is pretty much where everything's been going on. This is kind of, I guess, a lower field on McGill's campus, right by what's called the Roddick Gates, right at the corner of Sherbrooke and McGill College, and really the heart of downtown Montreal. And this is where it's happening here. Now, keep in mind, this campus, McGill says this campus is private land. So that's why, the university is trying to put an end to this encampment. McGill says it's against school policy and it's against the law as well. Now, McGill has said that they've tried to negotiate with the encampment, but nothing seems to really be working. They're at an impasse. They've informed the people in the encampment that what they're doing is against school policy and against the law, and that they should no longer be here, but it doesn't seem to be working. They've essentially warned the protesters here that they should be leaving. Very few have left, according to McGill. So at this point, without much else the university could do, they've resorted to the help of Montreal Police. So Montreal Police have been informed that McGill essentially needs their services and needs their help. So, and we've been in contact with Montreal Police this morning. They're aware of this request from McGill. They're keeping an eye on the situation, and Montreal Police, it's unclear exactly what they're going to do and when they would do anything for this encampment, to dismantle this encampment. It's not clear at all at this point. We don't have a lot of details from police, but they have said that they want a peaceful resolution to all of this.
Okay, and Matt, of course, we're seeing similar scenarios play out in the U.S., and everybody's watching that very closely. Some student protesters say they're hoping McGill will divest from Israel. What is the university saying about that?
You know, it hasn't been very clear at this point. You know, the protesters here are claiming that McGill has about $20 million in various companies that support Israel. We haven't heard a whole lot recently, at least from McGill, on that matter. They've really focused their statements a lot on this encampment and trying to have, you know, this encampment dismantled, while also trying to balance freedom of expression and freedom of speech. So it is, of course, a little bit of a delicate situation and has been over the last few days, but we haven't heard a whole lot from the university when it comes to divestment. But that is the number one demand of these protesters. They want the university to divest from companies that support Israel. So, you know, and the protesters have been very clear. They're not planning on going anywhere, regardless of what happens, until that demand is met. So it'll be really interesting to see how everything plays out throughout the afternoon and into the evening. Keep in mind, there is an injunction, a provisional injunction that's going to be debated at the Montreal courthouse by a lawyer. Essentially that injunction, if successful, could potentially lead to the dismantlement of this encampment. We're not sure exactly all those details, but it's really to get this encampment shut down. So it's an injunction against the encampment and against McGill. And that's going to play out at about 2:30 at the Montreal courthouse. So that's something we're keeping an eye on as well.
Matt, also, you know, at some of the college campuses in the States, some schools have been suspending some of the student protesters. Has there been any talk about that? You know, are the protesters worried about that? Is this a mix of, you know, students as well as outsiders who are protesting in a part of this encampment?
You know, we haven't necessarily asked, or I haven't necessarily asked the protesters specifically what their concerns are and what, you know, repercussions do they worry about. Keep in mind, from what we know, the majority of people in the encampment, at least from what McGill is telling us, are not members of the McGill community. They've repeated that message over and over again. Now, there are some McGill students here. There are some McGill students supporting the encampment as well. We even spoke to a McGill professor earlier this morning. So, but there is concern, no doubt, that police now are potentially getting involved and that there's a debate going on at the Montreal courthouse of a potential injunction. There's concern there, no doubt about that. We spoke with people about that. They're worried about it. And, you know, they're concerned about how this is going to develop. They're worried that they feel as though they've been protesting peacefully and that it could potentially escalate, you know, if police get involved. There's a major concern of that on behalf of the protesters here. They are worried about that.
Okay, hopefully we'll be able to check back in with you this afternoon to hear how those hearings went. CTV Montreal's Matt Grillo live from the campus of McGill University. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And coming up next on CB24 Live at Noon, we're going to get reaction from the David Suzuki Foundation to the province, setting a date for construction to begin on the very controversial Highway 413. Stay with us.
One of our number one promises was building the 413, and it gets people from point A to point B. You know, there's only a couple people that were against building the 413. Bonnie Crombie is against building the 413. She was against giving better paychecks and better jobs to these hardworking people, and she's on the wrong side of this. It's very simple. And then Merritt Stiles is another one, you know, that doesn't believe in building. We believe in building. We're going to be investing over $185 billion in infrastructure throughout the entire province.
Okay, so that was Premier Doug Ford. The province says that construction on the controversial Highway 413 is going to begin next year. The government says that the project will support 3,500 jobs each year. The 6-lane, 52-kilometer roadway is going to connect Halton and York regions. Environmental groups, they have criticized the project.
Yeah, the province says the highway is necessary to bring relief to drivers in the GTA. And for more reaction to this, we're joined live now by Gideon Foreman, climate change and transportation policy analyst at the David Suzuki Foundation. Thank you for joining us to talk about this. We just heard from the Ontario Greens, who are describing this project as an environmental wrecking ball. How do you describe it?
It's that and more. It's wrecking the environment, the Greenbelt. It's going to take out thousands of acres of farmland. And it's such a waste of money. We don't know what it's going to cost. $8 billion, $10 billion, it's anybody's guess. Think of what else we could do with that if we weren't wasting it on an unnecessary highway. Let's make better use of the highways we already have, like 407.
Okay, so you did mention thousands of acres of farmland.
Yeah.
Can you describe to us, like, paint a picture? What does that impact actually look like?
Yeah, so I've actually had a chance to speak to some farmers. It's been a real privilege. So some of the best farmland in the province is in southern Ontario, right? And some of it, probably 2,000 acres of that top farmland, is going to be paved by this highway. It's going to put our farmers out of business. It's going to make it harder for them to grow food for us. You know, I mean, how much worse could it get, right? We've spoken to these farmers. They're very unhappy with this, and it's so unnecessary. If we want to deal with the congestion problem, let's provide people alternatives to the car, like better public transit.
So seemingly the project is moving forward.
Yeah.
What do those farmers do? Where do they go?
Well, it's anybody's question. I mean, the government has a lot of explaining to do to these farmers who are going to be put out of business if this highway goes ahead. I don't know where they're going to go. I mean, that's a really good question.
Another really good question is, how much will this cost, as you just said? And that price tag is a big question mark right now. The Greens estimate it'll cost about $10 billion. That hasn't been verified by the PCs. What questions and concerns do you have on that front?
Yeah, I mean, how high is it going to go? These big projects are typically over budget. We've heard $8 billion, we've heard $10 billion. It could be way more. And think of what else we could buy with that money. So the Premier's talked about creating jobs. We could hire tens of thousands of nurses in this province with a fraction of that money. We could build thousands of units of affordable housing. We could build new hospitals. We could build new public transit. Those would be better uses and really would speak to the needs of Ontarians rather than an unnecessary, wasteful highway.
Okay, so realistically, what's next?
Well, groups like ours, farmers, environmentalists, and I think Ontarians in general are going to be speaking out against this highway. You know, polling that we looked at showed that about 3 out of 4 Ontarians say the Greenbelt is no place for new highways. It's not going to be a popular project, so I think we're going to see more people speaking out against the highway.
And so it sounds like, you still have a little fight left in you.
Absolutely.
How far are you willing to go here? And what does that fight look like?
We're going to be mobilizing more. Tens of thousands of Canadians have already signed petitions against this thing. We're going to be pushing the federal government. We're going to be pushing Ontario. We're going to link with all sorts of folks across the province to stop this thing.
What do you say to the Ford government, who says we're just trying to build highways so people can get around? We're trying to add to the economy, create thousands of jobs. They think this is a really good thing.
Yeah, let's create jobs, but let's do it with hiring nurses and building affordable housing, create way more jobs. In terms of congestion, yes, it's a big problem, but you don't bust congestion by building new highways. I can't think of anywhere on earth that's busted congestion by building new highways. It just invites more driving. We need to give drivers alternatives so they can leave the car at home. Better public transit, for example.
If you could speak directly to the Premier right now, what would you say?
I would say if you're concerned about saving money and creating jobs and doing what the people of Ontario want, abandon the highway and put that money into public transit and protecting our farmland.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Gideon Foreman with the David Suzuki Foundation. Good to get your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so
Gideon.
much.
And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, 2 grandparents and their infant grandchild. They are among 4 people killed. This is a part of a multi-vehicle crash on the 401 in Whitby.
A suspect vehicle driving the wrong way was being chased by police at the time. Just a horrible situation. We'll have the latest next.
Ontario's police watchdog says that 2 grandparents and their infant grandchild are among 4 people killed. This is in a multi-vehicle crash on the 401 in Whitby. A suspect vehicle driving the wrong way was being chased by police.
Premier Doug Ford has announced construction on the controversial Highway 413 will begin next year. We're going to have reaction coming up.
And the Leafs will face the Bruins tonight in a do-or-die Game 5. It's happening in Boston.
Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at Noon. I'm Lena Latafat.
And I'm Bakari Savage. A police chase turned deadly after a suspect started driving the wrong way. This was on Highway 401 in Whitby.
CP24's Beatrice Baseman is at the scene with the latest on what's now become an SIU investigation. This is so tragic, Beatrice.
Just an awful, awful tragedy, Lena. 3 members of the same family, 60, 55. These are the 2 grandparents and their infant grandchild, all tragically losing their lives in this crash that happened just after 8 o'clock last night. We now know it was a man that was fleeing from police in a U-Haul van who went the wrong way on the 401. He was traveling westbound in the eastbound lanes of this highway when this crash happened. That man has also passed away in this crash. Another person also in hospital. This all started out at an LCBO in Bowmanville, Lena and Bakari. This is Green Road and Highway 2, where CP24 has confirmed that an off-duty police officer was there at the LCBO, saw this robbery in progress, confronted the suspect, and a police source confirming to me that the suspect then brandished a knife. This Durham police officer then backed off, called police to let them know what was going on, and then 20 minutes later, this horrific crash happened on the highway. Here's more from Monica Hudon from the Special Investigations Unit about what consists of the SIU investigation at this point.
The preliminary information indicates that at approximately 7:50 p.m. last night, the Durham Regional Police Service became aware of a robbery at an LCBO in Clarington. Officers made their way to the scene and located a vehicle of interest, a cargo van. Officers followed the cargo van through numerous streets in Durham region as the vehicle drove erratically. At Stevenson Road, the cargo van entered Highway 401, traveling in the wrong direction, traveling westbound and eastbound lanes. Shortly after, there was a multi-vehicle collision involving at least 6 vehicles.
And there was obviously 7:50, 8 o'clock at night, lots of people on the road traveling eastbound along the highway. So lots of witnesses here who were just aghast by what they saw. Amongst those witnesses is Daryl Collette, who joins me now live here on CP24. Daryl, thanks so much for being here.
You're very welcome, Beatrice. How are you today?
Tell me, Daryl, how are you doing? And tell me what you saw happen last night as you were going eastbound on the 401.
Yeah, I think more than anything, I'm really grateful that I wasn't hurt and that I wasn't involved in the accident. What I saw just going eastbound was police lights actually ahead of me, moving westbound, coming towards us, which seemed out of the ordinary. And I was in the fast lane on the left-hand side of the road. And as they got closer and closer, it became evident that they were on our side of the road and was able to move over to the right as quickly as possible to avoid them, but had a white van drive past us, followed by about 15 to 20 police cars in both sides of the Meridian chasing after that car.
I can't imagine what's going through your mind in that moment, seeing vehicles coming towards you. You mentioned police lights were the first thing that kind of brought to your attention that something was happening. When you talk about that white van that was coming towards you, could you describe, Daryl, how this person was driving? Were they going really fast? Were they weaving in and out of traffic?
Yeah, when they passed me, they were doing relatively consistent in terms of speed. It was anywhere between probably 140 and 150. At the time, they were stuck just in the one outside, or as I say, the express lane on the far left. They were driving pretty consistently right down that lane. And thankfully, most of the traffic that was around me was able to just move over to the right out of their way, but driving quite fast. At that time, not very erratic, pretty much stuck to the one lane, but then police cars in tow right after them.
What was the police presence like, Daryl? How many cars did you see coming at you, essentially? And then as you continued to go eastbound, what did you start noticing happening behind you on the highway?
Yeah, so pretty significant police presence. As I say, probably between 15 to 20 cars. I would say majority of them, probably the 10 to 12, are on the actual eastbound, driving westbound, following behind. And then there was also a number of vehicles that were in the westbound lanes, express lanes, driving chasing as well. And then even as you continue to drive, you could still see police vehicles coming from as far away as Bowmanville right through to where we were located in Oshawa.
I know it happened a few minutes behind you, Daryl. Did you see any of the smoke from the fire coming up into the sky?
No, thankfully, it was probably 5 minutes behind me. So by the time that I had moved a little bit further east, no smoke, no major accident behind me. But you can tell, like, still seeing in the rearview mirror, vehicles having to veer over to the side in order to avoid both the driver and the police.
Listen, Daryl, I'm glad you're okay. You're able to talk to us, because this is just an awful tragedy that happened here. Thank you so much for your time and telling us what you saw and what you heard last night.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, and thankfully I'm safe, and my condolences to those families that unfortunately weren't as lucky.
Daryl, thank you. Just horrific, Lena and Bakari. 3 members of the same family. Again, if you're just joining us here on CP24, a grandmother, a grandfather, and their infant grandchild, all killed in this crash here on the highway last night around 8 o'clock after a driver entered the highway going the wrong way while fleeing from police. And now the Special Investigations Unit is going to be looking into this. They're tasked with probing this horrible crash and looking into police involvement in it and what police did, if anything, to contribute to this crash. That's going to take some time to come up with that report. And then Durham Regional Police, once the SIU's report is finished, Lena and Bakari, and their investigation's complete, Durham Police will certainly be conducting their own investigation into this horrific tragedy here in Whitby. Back to you.
Helping us try to make sense of those horrible last few moments of this crash. CP24's Beatrice Vaisman in Whitby.
And Premier Doug Ford was asked about the deadly collision by reporters today. Here's what he said.
My heart goes out to the family, and my condolences go out to them. It's heart-wrenching when you see everyone from a grandfather to a little baby that lost their lives because someone decides to rob a liquor store and go on the other side of the highway. It's a tragedy, and we're going to do everything we can to equip our police that there won't have to be high-speed chases. And one of the reasons we're getting helicopters for police agencies around Ontario just to support them.
In other news, the Toronto Police Services Board is meeting today, and Chief Myron Demkew says the recent hiring of 146 new officers is already making a difference.
This time last year, response times to Priority 1 calls were approximately 20 minutes. As you will recall, close to the end of 2023, the response times have crept up to over 22 minutes on average. Right now, Priority 1 response times are 18.1 minutes. We are achieving better response times for our most serious calls so far in 2024, while also attending 1,000 more Priority 1 calls than this time last year.
And at today's Toronto Police Board meeting, the co-chairs of the Community Advisory Panel, which is called CAP 2.0, they revealed some of the latest race-based data relating to policing in the city. And for the first time, the panel looked at mental health encounters with police.
We're still in the preliminary stages of this analysis, but this does represent the first for Canadian Police Services. So far, we found that 13% of all police enforcement actions have led to a mental health apprehension. And the majority of these apprehensions have been conducted at the officer's discretion. In terms of disproportionalities with mental health apprehensions and race, we have found that white persons were overrepresented in mental health apprehensions relative to their presence in enforcement actions, whereas Black persons were underrepresented in mental health apprehensions.
Toronto Police established an anti-racism advisory panel. This was in 2018, and it was based on a recommendation from an inquest into the death of Andrew Loku.
It is 12:39, 10 degrees. Let's get a check on the traffic situation. Send things over to Adjoa for a look at that. Good afternoon, Adj.
Oh, good afternoon. Hey, good afternoon, guys. We are dealing with problems on this pretty gray and overcast day. It is a collision from just before the noon hour. This is on the westbound lanes of the 401 in the transfers just on the approach to Bayview. collision involving a transport. Heavy tow is on scene, but the right lane and shoulder of the Transit is still blocked. It's impacting the corn collectors, so really slow actually now from well before the Don Valley Parkway. Headed towards the southbound 404 DVP. Wet and slow as you make your way through, starting from Shepherd all the way down towards about Lawrence. We had some problems. They were in the two left lanes. It was a collision that cleared, and I'll keep the good news rolling. Toronto-bound QEW at third line. HOV lane was blocked with the crash. That situation also cleared. Outside of camera view, crews on scene of a collision blocking lanes on St. Clair, right at Caledonia. I'll send it back to you.
The CP24 traffic report is brought to you by CapitalDirect.ca.
Toronto drivers have been dealing with a lot of traffic lately with the lane restrictions on the Gardiner and the 401. And for some tips on dealing with the traffic, we're joined live by Teresa DeFelice, Assistant Vice President, Government and Community Relations for CAA South Central Ontario. Thank you very much for taking time to speak with us today. So, let's talk about some basics when it comes to traffic, because on Saturday I was on the Gardiner, dealing with the Gardiner traffic, and then I had to switch over to the DVP, but there was a rollover, so I was stuck for about 2 hours, and fortunately I had enough gas. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it can be really challenging. These are not planned events. Some of the construction are planned, and so people, we recommend certain actions around dealing with those known construction situations. But you're right, in diverting to another place or a route that you don't expect that, we're seeing some of these collisions that are creating huge traffic volumes. And you're right, having a full tank of gas is really important because you don't know how long you're going to be stuck.
So let's talk about that. How do we deal with these situations? Let's talk about some common sense advice, making sure that, there's enough fuel. What if we run out of fuel? What if we are in a fender bender on these already crowded streets? What's your advice?
So first of all, always try and make sure that you've got enough gas in your tank. We always recommend not to go below a quarter tank of gas, depending on where you're traveling to and where you're traveling through. You might want to make sure that there's more, and that's a good practice to have all the time. If you experiencing a situation, obviously trying to move over to the shoulder is the safest thing. We also see a habit of people trying to get out of their cars and look at damage. Assessing the safety of the situation you're in is first and foremost. Not getting out on the side of traffic if you're exiting your vehicle, if you determine that that's what has to be done. Staying buckled in is probably the best thing, and calling for help, whether it's a situation where you need to call police or your roadside assistance provider or whatever that situation may be if the vehicle is not drivable. But really trying to get over to a safe spot is first and foremost.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interject.
No, and I think though that's some of the first things when dealing with those, what we call, you didn't intend to be stranded and all of a sudden you're stranded, gas, having a working cell phone, really being aware of your surroundings and not endangering yourself further.
And speaking of, I also saw a lot of this over the weekend, people driving down the shoulder to basically get to nowhere, and they weren't just driving, they were gunning it.
Yeah, no, this is a real problem. And we know, congestion or traffic is really frustrating, but it shouldn't lead to more dangerous behaviors. So when you're stuck in traffic, we know, especially amongst younger drivers, there's this pull to do something else, be on your phone, scroll, text, whatever. Don't get more distracted by the situation you're in. Those situations require more diligence than anything else, especially if you've got behavior like that. Don't engage in those behaviors. Everybody's in the same situation. It's really frustrating, but trying to remain calm, letting people in. I know sometimes we think we're going to get ahead by not letting someone in, but in fact, sometimes by allowing this, what we call the zipper merge, you can move traffic a lot more quickly. And really just give yourself some time to get places and think about the things that will calm you down so that you can just not get enraged and engage in further actions that are higher risk.
All right, some levity when navigating this traffic. Teresa DeFelice, Assistant Vice President, Government and Community Relations for CAA South Central Ontario. Thanks for your time and your advice.
Thank you.
And coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon, we're going to talk to the head of the Ontario Dental Association about concerns related to the new federal dental care plan.
Welcome back. The Canadian Dental Care Plan will start providing coverage this week, but we are hearing many who are eligible, they're having trouble finding a dentist. For more on what's happening, we turn to Dr. Brock Nicolucci, president of the Ontario Dental Association. Thanks so much for joining us. What's been going on? Why aren't more dentists signing on to what seems like a really good program?
You know, when this program was initially revealed, dentists across Canada were really excited. You know, 1/3 of Canadians were going to have the ability to have some dental coverage to go see a dentist. You know, 2/3 of Canadians have access to first-class dental care, and it was really exciting for us. But, you know, we've been saying all along that Health Canada needs to address our concerns, or dentists may not be able to provide care for those that have CDCP coverage. It's really been unfortunate that those concerns have not been addressed adequately. And now, as the program rolls out, patients are looking to have to change dentists or not be able to find dentists or not be able to participate in the program that was what they were promised.
So tell me more about these concerns. What are dentists asking for?
You know, we want to remove the terms and conditions and the unilateral contract signing. Having to sign a contract that can unilaterally be changed is not appropriate. I don't know anybody that would ever sign a contract that another person could change on them without telling them. And, you know, this is a huge problem for dentists. You know, we want to treat the patient. We do not want to treat the government. We don't want to treat Sun Life. We have a relationship with our patients, and that's how we've done dentistry.
Do you have a sense of how many dentists in this province have opted in versus how many have opted out?
You know, the number I was last hearing across the country was 5,000 oral health professionals. And when you have over 25,000 dentists and over 30,000 dental hygienists and approximately 2,500 denturists. Now, I know some of those dental hygienists work under the dentist, but still those numbers are not real promising.
And what are you hearing from the patients, the people that are coming into the dental office? What questions do they have? What do they understand about this program?
Well, you know, a lot of them don't understand everything about it. You know, one of the biggest questions they have, is it really a free program? And unfortunately, it's not. It's more like a dental subsidy, which is still a very good thing to help people get access to dental care. But a lot of them are asking, are dentists going to sign up? You know, I have my own patients that were in actually just this morning, and I had to explain that as of yet, my wife and I have not signed up. There's still these problems that we're trying to work out. And a lot of seniors, at least in my neck of the woods, they seem to be pessimistic about this. Like, this will be another failed failed program. And, you know, I'm trying to be optimistic with them. I said, you know, right now, we may not be in negotiations, but we are in discussions with them about how to get this program so more dentists can sign up.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Dr. Brock Nicolucci, president of the Ontario Dental Association. Keep us posted as to what happens next. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, we're going to preview the Leafs Game 5. Next, it's a do-or-die game. Stay with us.
And the Leafs face the Bruins tonight in a do-or-die Game 5. This is happening in Boston.
Yeah, just a few hours away now. For a look at their chances, we're joined live by TSN Radio's Matt Cauz. Always good to see you, Matt. Thanks so much for joining us. The big question mark, of course, is around Auston Matthews. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, it looks like he's probably not going to play tonight. He's been dealing with an illness that pulled him from the third period of the last game, and we saw his performance in the last couple of games wasn't nearly as good as what we saw in Game 2 of this series. So look for maybe Ty Domi's son, Max Domi, to be on a first line with Marner and with Bertuzzi, and that means Nylander on a second line with John Tavares and Matthew Knies. And now a lot of it's going to be about redemption for Mitch Marner. Can he drive that first line? Marner hasn't really produced much offensively so far in this series.
And then, you know, I guess along those lines, are they going to be able to do it? Let's talk about the team's performance so far.
And can they do it without Auston Matthews?
They have a very good record, actually, without Auston Matthews in the lineup. But the thing is, that's their record in the regular season, where they were number 2 in the NHL in scoring. So far in the playoffs, it's a small sample size, but they're dead last, tied with the Washington Capitals that just got swept by the New York Rangers. The power play is lousy as well. Can they get it done? Yes, they can, because they have the talent. But the question is that talent, does it just translate to the regular season and not the postseason? postseason, which requires a little bit more toughness and a little bit more sacrifice, something we haven't seen recently with the Maple Leafs in the playoffs.
Matt, this game has been described in so many ways. Must win, crucial, high stakes. How much pressure does that put on the players?
Well, it depends on the players. Some of them are signed to long-term contracts, so really maybe not as much. But there is a lot of pressure because there's a legacy on the line. If they get knocked out in 5 games, this is 7 years of a group that's very talented, and yet that doesn't translate in the playoffs. But maybe more pressure on the coaching staff, maybe even the president, Brendan Shanahan, who's now been there for a decade with only 1 playoff series win to show for it. If they lose tonight, there could be big changes coming up soon.
All right, this ends Matt Cauz. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
And thank you for watching CP24 Live at noon.